Few people imagine that for more than 3 centuries this humble secretion has been the subject of scientific curiosity, medical research, and even art. Indeed, the history of earwax is not bitter. Rather, it offers a surprisingly vivid lens on how society has differently understood the sense of hearing, the body, and its secretions.
Hi, my name is Lenia Slierendrecht and you are listening to Studium Generale, the podcast. Humans have many different bodily fluids, such as urine, bile and snot, but also earwax. What is earwax actually good for? Is it a gross bacterial substance that you need to remove with a cotton swab? Or does it help to protect against external invaders? What role does earwax play in hearing and hearing loss? Dr. Ruben Verwaal is historian and curator at Erasmus Medical Center and affiliated as a Rubicon Research Fellow at Durham University with his study into new perspectives on deafness. His book Blood, Sweat and Tears, which will be published in the English translation later this year, is all about human body fluids. What is there so interesting about these fluids, and why study their historical perception? Today, he will elaborate on earwax. Enjoy!
When I mention earwax, what do you think of? Do you picture a greasy, sticky, yellow-brown lump clinging on the tip of your earbuds? Do you experience disgust when you see someone sticking their finger in their ear, poking around, closely viewing some of the wax on their fingernail, and then slowly gesturing that finger towards their mouth while sticking their tongue out? In my book Blood, Sweat and Tears, I take a deep dive into the story of all our bodily fluids and the question why we often find them repellent. But here I'd like to consider the importance of one of those fluids, earwax. Few people imagine that for more than 3 centuries this humble secretion has been the subject of scientific curiosity, medical research, and even art. Indeed, the history of earwax is not bitter. Rather, it offers a surprisingly vivid lens on how society has differently understood the sense of hearing, the body, and its secretions. So what role does earwax play in hearing and hearing loss? An early episode in my narrative on earwax comes from the diary of Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke was a 17th century scientist and member of the Royal Society in London. On a cold December night in 1672, Hooke recorded in his diary a persistent buzzing in the ears that no silence could quiet. Seeking relief, he tried a concoction of warm honey, wool, and oil of bitter almonds, an old folk remedy that promised to dissolve the noise. But by New Year's Day, the buzzing persisted. He woke up with, and I quote, "a strange noise in the right ear, like a horn or bell." The buzzing in his ears continued, a symptom doctors today diagnose as tinnitus. Months later, in the summer, a Dr. Carew used a syringe to rinse out Hooke's ears, and ta-da, a large lump of earwax streamed out, and the buzzing vanished. So when I leaf through Hooke's diary, I find no further references to the noises in his head, and that suggests to me that the removal of that lump of earwax solved the issue. This case study demonstrates that as long as fluids are flowing, health and hearing is maintained. But the moment the earwax congeals and thickens, hardness of hearing ensues. What was earwax exactly made of? What is its function? This is a question that French anatomists in the 17th century also asked. One of them was Guichard-Joseph Duvernay, and he studied the phenomenon, and he published about it in Treatise on the Organ of Hearing in 1683. He was the first to describe earwax, or in Latin cerumen, from cera or wax. He detailed and catalogued the many properties of earwax: transparent, yellow, oily, bitter, slippery, viscous, dry, sometimes in large quantities, sometimes in small volumes. And Duvernay linked earwax to 2 primary functions. First, moistening the eardrum, preventing it from drying out and losing elasticity. Second, trapping dust and deterring insects, thereby protecting the delicate inner structures of your ear. So Duvernay's observations laid the groundwork for centuries of scientific studies about the protective role of earwax. Because, for example, a century later, in the 19th century, also chemists turned their attention to cerumen, or earwax. One of them was Antoine François de Fourcroy, and he obtained earwax samples from his direct colleague, Allais, Dr. Allais, who was reputed to produce considerable quantities of earwax. Now, Fourcroy described the wax as, quote, the least alterable of all animal matters. So, right after bone, it was the most strong substance of the body. It is a substance that does melt under heat and smokes, but it resists distillation and forms an emulsion rather than that it dissolves in water. The different experiments of Fourcroy reinforced the belief that earwax kept the auditory canal supple. But he added a third function. It softened and even deadened sonorous vibration, so it implies that there was a modest acoustic damping effect. The evidence for this claim remained thin, yet it's ironic to think that the thick fluid that caused hardness of hearing may also be protective, a protection against hearing loss. So please, listener, protect your hearing by not clearing out your ears of wax. Do we actually have historical earwax? I work as a curator of the medical collections in the Erasmus Medical Center, and so I wondered whether I could find some actual earwax saved in a science museum. After all, medical museums store the strangest things, from preserved bloodsuckers to a salivary stone pulverizer. But nope, I did not find any historical earwax. What I did find, however, were historical ear scoops or ear spoons. And these are usually 8 centimeters long. They are long, tiny sticks, usually made of metal, but in historical ones are also made of wood or bamboo. And they come in a wide variety, sometimes with decorative motifs. So when syringing your ears failed, barber surgeons turned to ear scoops to scrape the cerumen from the ear canal. Barber surgeons stored these small ear picks alongside their tweezers and scalpels and bloodletting balls. The prevalence of ear scoops is evident in museum collections as a witness to their widespread use in cultures across the world. They range from bronze Roman ear spoons to 19th century pieces originating in Indonesia, Ethiopia, and Japan. In some cultures, ear picks double as hairpins or jewelry, underscoring the cultural crossover between hygiene, aesthetics, and status. Earaches and deafness were quite common complaints in pre-modern times, and physicians have described a bewildering array of cures. The first is, for example, heat, covering the ears with thick wool or musk perfumed cotton to melt hardened wax, as also Robert Hooke had attempted. The second is liquids, injecting all kinds of warm mineral waters or other fluids with soap and honey or linseed oil mixed with wine spirit. A notorious case involved the philosopher John Locke, who suffered a great deal from ear problems in later life. It began in 1701 when Locke caught a cold that caused asthma and a throat infection, followed by severe earache. His friend and the doctor Alexander Gickie treated him with a compress consisting of a large roasted onion wrapped in kale. The remedy was unsuccessful, and after some time Locke was unable to hear at all. But Locke's mother suggested the gravy from a pound of lean beef. Just imagine, he was one of the most renowned philosophers in European history who wrote about religious tolerance, slavery, and political theory, and he allowed his mother to pour hot beef gravy into his ear. Ultimately, Locke's pain was relieved when an internal abscess burst, expelling pus dripping out of his ear. Not all ear ailments stemmed from earwax, clearly. Dr. Gickie was well pleased to hear of the eruption of matter, and he proposed to cleanse out the ear with rose water, tincture of myrrh, and brandy. The 20th century introduced a new dimension to earwax, antiseptic properties. In the 1950s, otologist Ben Centuria and chemist Christopher Caterthus reported that earwax prevented fungal and bacterial growth. Their research prompted attempts to synthesize an artificial earwax to protect Marines and other soldiers serving in the tropics. Because in warm climates, soldiers produce less earwax, and that reduces their protection of the ear and increases infections. But the trials of the scientists failed to isolate a definitive chemical formula. The syrupy cerumen remained stubbornly complex, and it did not surrender its secrets. But the antiseptic properties of earwax continued to fascinate scientists. So 2 decades later, 2 American researchers, Tu-Ji Chai and Toby Chai, they collected the earwax from 12 volunteers. And they preserved that earwax in a solution. They added all common bacteria to the mixture, strains of E. coli, Marsensis, H. influenza, and the earwax eradicated around 99% of all these common bacteria. 30 to 80% of other bacterial strains succumbed as well. So the study cemented earwax's reputation as a natural antimicrobial shield. So ear infections are another reason not to use cotton buds every morning. Earwax even featured in the history of genetics. Perhaps the most enduring scientific revelation concerns what's called cerumen dimorphisms, the observation that earwax comes in 2 distinct types. The first one is dry, grainy and lighter, and the second one is wet, sticky and darker. This was discovered by Japanese anthropologist Buntaro Adaki, and he first noted this pattern in the 1930s, and he linked it to broader racial classifications of the era, saying that the dry earwax was most common among East Asian populations and the wet, sticky earwax prevalent in African, European, and Middle Eastern groups. In 1962, another scientist, Ai Matsunaga, identified the single gene governing the type of earwax. And that gene is ABCC11, located on chromosome 16. And dependent on the variant you have, a dominant W or the recessive one, your ear glands produce the wet wax or the dry wax. It even follows simple Mendelian inheritance. If you have one or both parents with wet earwax, then you'll have wet earwax too. So earwax offers a rare but very visible marker of genetic heredity. The gooey stuff in your ears had nevertheless acquired a prominent place in our thinking about ethnicity and heredity. Now let's go into the art gallery, because the visceral texture of earwax was also an inspiration for artists. For example, John Salvest, he made an artwork titled Journal, an open wooden box full of perfectly arranged cotton buds, saturated with collected earwax. Initially, you delighted seeing the beautiful and fascinating artwork, but then as you come closer, you see and you realize the bodily waste filling you with disgust. I used to be a fervent cotton bud user myself. It creates a pleasant, tickling sensation, and there's a certain pleasure to be had from picking your ears clean. Don't you find that removing the cotton bud with white-orange color, that you respond with disgust as well as satisfaction? Ear, nose, throat experts call this phenomenon eargasm. Now, the artworks like John Salvest force us to ask, when does a biological byproduct become a cultural artifact? The answer lies in the very duality that defines earwax, simultaneously protective and repulsive, clinical and symbolic. So to conclude, earwax has traveled from Robert Hooke's buzzing nights to modern microbiology labs. It's a winding path through science, medicine, folklore, and art. It serves as a reminder that even the most mundane bodily fluids can carry profound stories and human ingenuity, cultural values, and biological resilience. So the next time you feel fluids in your ear canal, consider the centuries of curiosity, science, and art it has sparked. And perhaps for once, try to resist the urge to stick cotton buds into your own ear to reach eargasm. Instead, savor the yellow secretion. Let it sit quietly as a golden testament to your hearing or deafness and a healthy ear routine.
Thank you for listening. Interested in more? Join one of our Studium Generale live events. The calendar can be found on our website or socials. Or listen to our podcast through Spotify or YouTube.